riots in the street this week as a lesbian character on the TV series The 100 was killed in the same way that a lot of other characters have died in a series that hasn't exactly been shy of slaughtering its characters. So to the point where we're probably more down to like the 10 than the 100 at this point. So apparently if you like genitals the same as yours in your sex partner, that should somehow render you plot invulnerability for some reason. And equality doesn't mean being treated the same as everybody else, it means special treatment, which seems peculiar to me. I don't get it. I understand that people think there's underrepresentation and so on, but the idea that simply because a character slots into a particular subcategory that they should be immune to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune strikes me as being somewhat counter to the point. But what do I know? Quite a lot as it happens. South by Southwest had its two rival panels, supposedly all about online harassment, though the second panel was never supposed to be about online harassment, even slightly, and ended up not being about it at all. Neither panel was particularly attended, though apocryphal local reports say that the Gamergate panel, which wasn't actually a Gamergate panel, was slightly better attended than the anti-harassment panel. Harassment, just to make sure that the scare quotes are equally distributed here. So the biggest controversy about the whole thing was that outspoken free speech advocate and porn starlet, as they used to say back in the day, Mercedes Carrera, was eventually barred from the second meeting, which was about ethics in games journalism, as it's always been about, because she refused to be censored by South by Southwest. On her own personal Twitter, not directed at anybody, but talking about the host of the previous seminar, Randy Lee Harper, Mercedes had some nasty things to say. Plenty of people have nasty things to say about Randy Lee Harper. I have nasty things to say about Randy Lee Harper, because they are a libelous and defamatory, horrible person, and genuinely a harasser. So to have someone like that hosting a panel on internet harassment was just... what are you doing? So Mercedes said some horrible things about Randy. Doesn't matter. Randy's got Mercedes blocked. Wasn't directed at them. No at on the tweets. Nothing like that. Mercedes also made a video about the problems with it, just kind of ranting about the whole thing. And South by Southwest insisted that she take it all down, but because she's a free speech advocate and that was part of what the topic of the second panel was about, Mercedes said fuck you, and so was barred from being on the panel. Which probably hurt the attendance as well. Let's all be honest, if you have a porn star on a panel, people are interested. Even though Mercedes is a brilliant woman, very intelligent, very articulate, lots to say, very relevant. Porn stars what gets bums in seats. It's just, that's the way life is. So that was a bit of a missed opportunity there. The first panel was the usual kind of victimization thing you'd expect, bad advice made by bad people to a very tiny audience. And then the second one, everyone had been told that it was a Gamergate panel, it was, these were terrible people, so it's not that surprising that nobody showed up to that particularly either, especially with Mercedes being barred. So, and it's a technical subject, and people aren't necessarily at these kind of shows and conventions for either of these topics. So, I'm not particularly bothered by either. The whole thing was a huge blown up fuss over nothing, and I think that's been largely proven. So we can all retreat into our corners and carry on having our conversations. And there you go. It was a non-event, and I've just waffled on long enough over something that ended up being nothing. So, cut. YouTube analyst, commentator, news guy, Mundane Matt was swatted, and he's a big guy, so I'd like to see the SWAT that was used. Kidding. Love you, Matt. Swatting. Yeah, see, that's the kind of thing that I think we can all agree is genuinely terrible and crosses the line from trolling and insulting people on the internet into something that's serious, because you know these paramilitary police, they shoot motherfuckers and they shoot people's dogs, and it's a bad scene waiting to happen just when anything goes wrong. And Matt, bless him, he posted the audio that he'd recorded, because he was in the middle of recording a video, just forgot to switch the camera on when all this happened, and you know that's got to be embarrassing, because how do I put this delicately? I don't. You know, he was a pussy. Everybody would be a pussy when the SWAT comes smashing the door, and you can hear the fear in his voice, and oh God, I cringed listening to it, but I think it's so brave of him to do it. I think that's a good thing for him to do. I think it's something the community needs to talk about, and we need to educate police departments about. So yeah, more power to Matt for doing it. All the more for how embarrassing it was. I don't know what this was over. Could have been YouTube drama. Could have been, you know, holdover Gamergate stuff. Who fucking knows? But it's a dick move, and I think we can all come together on that. I think that's a level of bullshittery on the internet that I think everyone can agree crosses the bounds and shouldn't be allowed. So yeah, sympathy for Matt. Maybe let's try and do something about it as a community. That would be cool. Killscreen, a website I'd never heard of until this emerged, which may be why, has posted a review of the new game The Division, decrying it for its politics. Yeah, okay. I mean, is it really that surprising that a Tom Clancy legacy game is going to have this kind of gung-ho government agency kind of thing going on with it? Is that a surprise to anyone who's ever read anything by Tom Clancy, or has seen any films based on Tom Clancy novels, or has played any games based on Tom Clancy works or ideas? You know, this shouldn't be shocking to anybody, and yet somehow it is. So the basic problem seems to be that they see some kind of classism and racism underlying the world building of the game, and I haven't picked it up. I was tempted for a while, but just the mechanics of it, mixing real world stuff with quite heavy RPG mechanics like DPS and so on, just doesn't work for me. Doesn't work for me at all. I'm gonna stick with Destiny, I think. But I love the idea and I love the world building, and I've studied history, so I know that these kind of contingencies were in place for things like the proposed Nazi invasion of Britain. You know, Churchill had this whole concept of ungentlemanly warfare, and there were contingency plans for British suicide bombers if the Nazis had got in, and for continuity of government. And the same thing during the Cold War. I mean, if you've studied the Cold War, you know that there were all these really quite harsh plans in place for if society collapsed, if there was a nuclear war. You know, there was all this stuff in place for continuity of government. You know, there were all these bunkers up and down the country. There were stockpiles of food and water and weapons and ammunition, and the idea was to just arm the general police force or anyone else that worked for the government. And then that's why there's this iconic Cold War image from the film Threads, which is a traffic warden with a bandaged face and holding a Lee Enfield rifle. You know, that was the actual plan in the case of societal collapse. So this updated version of that really is what The Division is. There's this plague outbreak and society breaks down, and this is this contingency plan by the government to maintain and restore order and to secure important areas like power stations and hospitals and so on, and to give basically ordinary people executive power to shoot looters and so on. So this is all based on real ideas, and yet their complaint is somehow against this kind of verisimilitude in the game. Yeah, it's still fiction, and part of the point of fiction is to experience the other. Whether that's a jackbooted government thug or a Molotov toting anarchist. Right, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, and this is an example of where you can come in and you can inhabit that other point of view. You don't have to like it. Part of the fun can be not liking it. That's kind of the point of horror films and so on. So to step into another set of ideological boots is an opportunity, I think. And clearly they got a lot out of analysing it from their perspective, through their lenses. They seem to have got a lot out of it. So they seem to have gotten something good out of the game, and yet they mark it right down because it doesn't tie into their particular ideology. You know, it can be fun playing the bad guy. You know, if you want to interpret it as the bad guy and then go all out, that can be a lot of fun. So you see this a lot, and increasingly in reviews, despite the pushback from the consumer, this ideological lensing, this determination that people seem to have to see things in the worst possible light through their particular ideological lens, rather than to accept it as it is and to consider the viewpoint of the author. And this is meant to be a light-hearted show, and here I've gone into a big rant about the nature of fiction and experiencing the other. But if they're here, then the point is like about a light year that way. That's how far from the point of fiction. Here is someone reviewing fiction, and they're that far away from the point. And I just, I'm so tired of it. So tired of it. In the atheist world, there's been a split between the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front. Free Thought blogs and this new set of blogs called Orbit. It's hard to really see what the split is about. I don't know whether it's between PZ Myers fanboys and non-PZ Myers fanboys, but Free Thought blogs was already pretty awful, but pretends to be neutral in some ways. And Orbit seems to have gone completely past A+, and way off into the social justice nether realm, somewhere in that direction. So yeah, I just ignore it. I guess let them have their own increasingly shrinking little safe space, and more power to them. Go self-segregate. Bye. It's ironic, really. I've often thought of shooting Atheism Plus people into Orbit, and now they've set up a place called Orbit. But yeah, settle for what you can get, I guess. It's old news, really, but Megabot vs. Curitas is coming soon. Yes, it's the American giant piloted robot versus the Japanese giant piloted robot, and that should be happening in June. It seems to have been picked up in the news again recently, so here's hoping it does actually go ahead and we see our first full-scale mech-on-mech action. And with Robot Wars coming back as well, it's going to be a treat for some hot metal-on-metal action. And I don't mean Joan Jett and Great Cat. At GDC, apparently, they're advocating Marxism as a great way to design games. And I'm not even kidding. You know, I'm inclined to agree. There is an important lesson in Marxism on game design, and that is that all ideology must give way to pragmatism. Otherwise, bad shit happens. It's just for someone who's read Marx, this is just kind of and studied communism, and who considers themselves to be far on the left. This is just frigging painful. You know, as it turns out, history is not deterministic. It's not a line. You know, it's a massive chaos. Where you can't predict what's really going to happen, and you know, small actors in one place can cause big effects in another. It's not predictable in the way that Marx thought. Marx's observations, of course, were bang on. Rich people are indeed wankers and tend to sit on wealth and take control and power. But the other really annoying thing in this instance is that it's going to reinforce this idea of socialism as being part of Marxism, when socialism also exists as its own ideology, and this just perpetuates the horrible myth that makes everyone shriek and run away from anything left-wing ever, because it all sounds fucking crazy when it comes out of the mouths of these wankers, and that's just no help to anybody. There's a huge LARP event coming up in Poland, in a great big castle. It's done on the Nordic LARP tradition, which is usually pretty fucking intense, with a lot of effort put into costume and so on, and it involves White Wolf. So what could be wrong with that, eh? Well, the Nordic LARP part and the White Wolf part. Now, Nordic LARPs are great in lots of ways. There's an intensity to them, and a craft to them that is brilliant. But they can be very, 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 very pretentious, and that's even in comparison to White Wolf stuff. So that's one thing. And then the White Wolf involvement. Well, you would think wouldn't you, that the involvement of the company behind the whole thing and that knows the background and that wrote all this and, you know, their involvement should be a really great, positive, wonderful thing. But you see, my perspective on that is a little biased because I was a teenage vampire. See, I was involved in the Camarilla LARP Society for about 10 years, from around 1995 to around 2005, and during that time there was an increasing amount of involvement by White Wolf. And at the time we thought this was a great thing because the people in the US who were in charge of the Camarilla at the time were, how do I put this? So we thought, you know, White Wolf coming in, taking more direct control of the society and everything would be a good thing. No, they were even worse. So White Wolf's gone through a couple of management changes since then, you know, Onyx Path and CCP and on to God knows where now. So maybe it's different now. Maybe it's different. Maybe they deserve another chance. I'll never know. I can't fucking afford to go to Poland, and I am not prepared to get involved in the whole LARP scene again. At least not the vampire or mage or none of the White Wolf scene. I'm just not prepared to get into that again because it was fucking heartbreaking. To be honest, I poured my heart and soul into that society and did everything I could to make great games, and it was infested with tossers that made it virtually impossible to tell good stories or have a good time at all. In the end, you know, politics, sex, because LARPers seem to use them as reasons to fuck. You know, all of that just ended up getting in the way, and so I had to wave goodbye to it and move on and sail on to shores new. But yeah, maybe I'm just bitter because I've never been invited to any of these Nordic conventions. Maybe invite me to RopeCon and show me the error of my ways, and I will become a convert and praise Jesus and all the rest of it. But this looks really cool, looks really interesting. If you can stand the pretentiousness and you don't have the hang-ups about White Wolf that I do, maybe you should look into some of these events, because they at least look fantastic. Brianna Wu was on Sci-Fi Channel's show The Internet Ruined My Life. Wu. Rarely has there been a more apposite secondary name than that. Wu, used in skeptical circles to describe snake oil, nonsense, crystal healing and other bullshit, and as internet feminism's probably most prolific purveyor of bullshit, it's definitely a good name for Brianna. I mean, what can you say about it? It was bullshit from beginning to end. Oh, I had to leave my house because of threats on the internet. Yeah, there's evidence you never did. Oh, this terrible person, you know, with his car and his guns is coming to get me. Jace Connors. Internet troll. Performance artist. There are not enough scare quotes in the world to put around that. But are they a genuine threat to anybody? Are they fuck? And Brianna knew that and said so on Twitter. You can go and find out for yourself. But when it comes to TV, no, somehow that's a serious and really genuinely problematic thing. Look, trolling happens on the internet. We all know it. Anyone who's been on the internet for any amount of time should develop the skill to discern genuine threat from bullshit. And when people who claim to be involved in tech or have been active online or involved in any way for any amount of time start trying to claim that this shit is genuine and real and serious and a genuine issue that really severely affects us, when you can get rid of it with 2 clicks, block, mute, ignore, unfollow, that's all it takes. So anyone who claims any kind of technical capacity whatsoever or involvement on the internet whatsoever, whenever they talk about this as if it's a genuine issue, I call bullshit. You know, I get shit from people every day, and these aren't the same kind of internet trolls. These are people who think they're doing the right thing. Again, there aren't enough scare quotes in the world. You know, I get people who genuinely hate me. They're not just pretending to wind me up, you know? And every day I get some bullshit from somebody. And all I've ever done is said, you should be okay to make and do whatever you want. That's apparently a big controversial statement. This is Nonsense. It's bullshit. Brianna knows it's bullshit. Sci-Fi Channel or whichever production company did this did not do their due diligence in looking into this. It's just the same old crap all over again. And why are people so determined to keep Gamergate being a thing by lying about it? I had some fuck nugget on Facebook the other day trying to tell me it was a front for recruitment to Stormfront. I mean, I'm not involved anymore, but when this kind of bullshit comes across my screen, what am I supposed to do? Ignore it and let it fester? No. Look, the internet ruined my life. Get me on the fucking Sci-Fi Channel and I'll show you some truth. Some genuine horrible shit. And then there's maybe we can... Mundane Matt got swatted. Let's talk about that, shall we? Not some twat monkey in a skull mask obviously trolling. Alright? Give it a fucking rest. I know your Patreon's low on money, but seriously. God fucking damn it, enough. And that was the Geek that was. Wasn't particularly funny, but it was bloody frustrating.